The forest was unnaturally quiet that night, the kind of silence that hums in your ears, where even the whisper of the wind feels like it's holding its breath. It was 2:47 a.m., somewhere deep in the mountains of Kunar Province, Afghanistan. A small U.S. Army reconnaissance team, 5 men, 1 interpreter, was holding position on a ridgeline overlooking a narrow valley. Their mission was simple: observe Taliban movement, report activity, and remain unseen. But what they saw that night wasn't enemy movement. It wasn't anything they had trained for.
Sergeant Michael Reeves was the team leader, a 32-year-old veteran on his 3rd deployment. He'd seen combat. He'd lost friends. He'd been through ambushes and nighttime raids. Nothing scared him easily. But as he later told investigators, something about that night felt wrong before it even began. The air was still, but not calm. The men felt pressure in their ears, like the air itself was too heavy. The local interpreter, Hamid, kept glancing toward the tree line behind them, murmuring a quiet prayer under his breath. When Reeves asked him what was wrong, Hamid simply replied, "The mountains, they wake at night." Reeves brushed it off. Superstition was common among locals. Spirits, jinn, ghosts of the fallen. But Hamid's eyes, they weren't afraid of myths. They were afraid of something he knew.
At 3:12 a.m., the first soldier to notice it was Private First Class Lewis, on watch with night vision goggles. He whispered into the radio, "Sarge, I've got movement. Maybe 200 meters out, low to the ground." Reeves and Corporal Jensen moved beside him, peering through their scopes. Nothing. The valley below was empty, still, and coated in a layer of mist. Then Lewis whispered again, more urgently, "There, between those rocks. It's moving, but the grass isn't." Through the green haze of the night vision, something appeared to be shifting, a darker shape against the already dark terrain. It didn't crawl, walk, or slither. It flowed, like smoke, but thicker. Reeves blinked. The wind had picked up slightly, moving left to right, but the shadow was moving against it.
"Probably an animal," Jensen muttered, trying to steady his breath. But even he could hear it, faint, rhythmic, like breathing through a tunnel. Reeves ordered them to mark the coordinates and stay low. For nearly 20 minutes, they watched the shape drift across the valley, against the wind, vanishing and reappearing between rocks. At 3:34 a.m., their thermal scope briefly caught it, but it registered no heat, just a void.
The team didn't fire. They just watched, their training battling with primal fear. And then, as suddenly as it came, it stopped. The mist swallowed it whole. The valley was still again. At dawn, Reeves radioed the base, reporting unknown movement, possible environmental distortion. It was logged, but never investigated. That evening, as the sun sank behind the peaks, Hamid refused to stay for another night. He said softly, "They see who watches them." Over the next 2 weeks, similar reports began trickling in from nearby units, men claiming to see something moving through the mountains at night, something without sound, without heat, without logic. By late 2009, these encounters became quietly discussed among soldiers stationed across eastern Afghanistan. The official term in some unit logs was optical anomaly. Unofficially, they called it the Shadow Man of Kunar. One squad from the 173rd Airborne recounted seeing a shape pacing their perimeter at night, always keeping the same distance no matter how far they walked. Another team from the 10th Mountain Division
reported their motion sensors triggering without visible cause, followed by camera footage showing what appeared to be a distortion in the air, like heat waves in freezing cold.
Most dismissed it. War zones create stress, fatigue, and hallucinations. But others weren't so sure. Staff Sergeant William Hawk Donnelly, interviewed years later, said something that stayed with every soldier who heard it. You can tell when fear comes from your mind and when it comes from somewhere else. This wasn't in my head. It was outside, watching us.
It wasn't the first time strange reports had emerged from these mountains. In the 1980s, Soviet soldiers stationed in the same valleys had filed classified reports of shifting black shapes during night patrols, believed at the time to be Taliban ambush tactics using camouflage. One declassified KGB field report from 1985 described moving shadows unaffected by wind or terrain. The terrain itself seems to feed these stories. Kunar's mountains are ancient, carved by centuries of war and older myths that predate recorded history. Locals believe the valleys are inhabited by pari, or shadow spirits, beings of smoke and darkness that guard forbidden places. Western soldiers, unaware of these legends, would later describe experiences eerily similar to these tales. In one chilling incident from 2010, a drone feed reportedly captured a dark mass gliding across open terrain in complete silence. Analysts initially thought it was a camera malfunction until one operator noticed the trees around the mass bending slightly toward it. The file was classified and never publicly released, but multiple witnesses confirmed its existence under anonymity. As the years passed, the stories spread, from whispered barracks tales to quiet online forums of veterans sharing what they'd seen. Some said the shadow was electromagnetic interference, a field anomaly, or even an advanced stealth drone. Others said it was something ancient, something that had always lived in those mountains. Reeves left the Army in 2012. In a 2018 podcast interview, he recalled that night for the first time in detail. His voice trembled slightly as he said, "You can't explain it with science. I've seen how wind moves. I've seen heat mirages. But this, it had intent. It wasn't random. It moved like it knew we were there."
As of today, no official military document confirms or denies these encounters. The few references found in declassified logs are vague, listed under environmental irregularities or visual distortions. Yet, among those who served in that region, men hardened by war and stripped of superstition, the memory of that presence lingers. One of Reeves's men, Corporal Jensen, never spoke publicly about it, but his journal, recovered after his passing in 2016, contained a single line scrawled under that night's entry. It moved against the wind, and the wind was afraid of it.
By 2013, rumors of the shadow had made their way beyond Afghanistan. Veterans returning home brought more than memories of war. They carried fragments of a story that refused to die. On late-night radio shows, in dimly lit veteran bars, and in quiet conversations between soldiers who'd never met, the same details would resurface. No one claimed to fully understand it, but the pattern was there. Deep valleys, no wind, thermal voids, whispers of movement in places untouched by sound. When researchers and journalists began investigating, they stumbled upon something curious. That similar accounts dated back far earlier than the modern war. British soldiers in the late 19th century, during the Second Anglo-Afghan War, described shifting silhouettes
in reports from the same mountain regions. Their letters spoke of black fog that moved with purpose and figures glimpsed between the ridges. Those letters had been forgotten in archives until historians, decades later, began to piece them together. Could it be that different generations of soldiers, separated by centuries, culture, and technology, were describing the same thing? The deeper one digs into the region's folklore, the more unsettling it becomes. Kunar's valleys are wrapped in myth, places the locals call Wadi Nafrin, or the Valleys of Warning. Shepherds refuse to bring their flocks near certain caves after dusk. Villagers tell stories of black smoke taking human form, sometimes wandering into camps during the night, standing motionless until it's seen, and vanishing when confronted. To Western ears, these might sound like campfire tales. But for soldiers on foreign soil, far from home, and stripped of light and comfort, every superstition feels a little too real when the night stretches endlessly around you. In 2015, a Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) request by an independent journalist, Tom Parnell, uncovered fragments of a U.S. Army field report marked confidential. The document, titled Environmental Observation Incident K-47, described an event eerily similar to Reeves' account. According to the report, a small reconnaissance drone recorded what appeared to be a dark, undefined movement in Sector 47 of Kunar Valley. The footage showed a shape traversing 400 meters of open terrain against a crosswind of 12 knots. The object emitted no thermal signature, produced no shadow of its own, and disappeared mid-frame without fade or interference. The report concluded with the phrase, "Unable to classify, possible electromagnetic field distortion." But the most chilling part of the report wasn't in the text. It was in a short debrief from the operator who had monitored the drone feed. He wrote, "The object changed direction right before our camera focused on it, as if it knew." Parnell's discovery reignited discussions that military circles had tried to bury for years. The official stance remained that it was all environmental, mirages, technical malfunctions, fatigue. Yet, as one anonymous intelligence analyst told him off-record, "We stopped calling them malfunctions when they started happening in multiple locations at the same time."